Mr. Black?
Hey, good morning.
Sir?
Hey, doing all right, thank you.
Now, this is the first time we've had an opportunity to speak, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I'll try and ask my questions clearly and loudly. Of course, I'm not going to yell, but if you don't hear my question or you need me to repeat it, I'm more than happy to do so, okay?
Okay.
All right. You were started at your training, so that's where I'm going to start with you as well. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, you talked about you had done a certain amount of precepting when you started. Is that correct?
Sure.
Okay. And prior to you doing this extubation, and just to be clear, you were working at the ICU for almost 2 years when you did the one extubation and also, actually both of these, right around 1 year and 10 months. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So you weren't, while you were a young nurse there, you certainly weren't new, right?
Yeah, so there was a 2-year mark was kind of when you were considered experienced enough to begin training other nurses. So I was just under that.
Okay.
But I'd been there for a while.
And during your training, you had done approximately 12 palliative extubations, correct?
Yeah, so I would have been precepting with a nurse on the day shift.
Right, so this wasn't something that was foreign to you. You had the opportunity to be exposed through it throughout your training, correct?
That's correct.
All right, and you talked about this palliative withdrawal training that you received. I guess it was a course given by someone from the palliative withdrawal team? Or palliative care team, excuse me.
Yeah, I don't think that the entire course was directed at palliative withdrawal, but sort of end of life care in a sense.
And in that class, you were taught that, and I want to make sure I get this right, every patient is different. Don't be afraid to give larger doses of medication. I know it seems uncomfortable at times. Correct? You were trained that by Mount Carmel?
That sounds correct.
And that training was conducted by someone from the day shift, correct?
I believe it was a nurse practitioner on the palliative care team on the day shift. That's correct.
Okay. And she, in fact, told you that I've given enough to put down an elephant. Do you recall that?
Object. Hearsay.
It's not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, Judge.
What's it say?
Effect on the listener. It was his training. You can answer.
My memory is a little bit fuzzy, but that's certainly in previous records that I've stated that.
Okay. So you recall telling the police that that's how you were trained, correct?
I believe that's what it said in the, and I believe that's what I said in the interview. That's correct. I don't remember it exactly.
And of course, the prosecutors were there, right?
They were there when I was speaking to the police. It was.
Object, Your Honor. That's may we approach.
Yes, you may.
Yes, Judge. Just to be clear, you had an initial meeting with homicide detectives, correct? You have to say yes.
I did have a meeting.
Okay. And then,
He said, did he say you have to say yes?
That wasn't what I heard.
Okay.
well, he was nodding his head. I was telling him
Okay.
you have to verbalize it for the record.
So I did have a meeting with the police detectives.
Okay. And then after that, you had another meeting where you were present, your lawyer was present, and then you had some homicide detectives present, as well as the prosecutors, different prosecutors than these here, correct?
That's correct. They were different prosecutors.
Okay. And you had made it clear that this was your training, correct? By Mount Carmel.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, there's been a lot of talk of palliative withdrawals in this trial for understandable reasons, but palliative withdrawals were in fact not common in the nighttime ICU, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
In fact, the entire year and 10 months that you worked with Dr. Husel, you only did one with him, correct?
That's correct. I participated in both of these, but only one was with one of my patients. So it was a very, very small percentage of what we did.
And you say it's a small percentage of what you did. The fact is that in that year and 10 months, hundreds or close to 1,000 of lives were saved while you were there, correct?
Yes, I believe I cared for hundreds of patients during that time.
Okay. And it wasn't all palliative extubations and people dying, correct? That's, I guess, what I'm...
That's correct.
Okay. And you understood that Dr. Husel was aggressive in basically everything he did, correct?
Yes.
He was aggressive in the care that he provided for his patients, correct?
Yes, sir.
He was aggressive with the medications that he gave, correct?
Yes, sir.
And he was aggressive with the doses he gave, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you would classify Dr. Husel as hardworking, would you not?
Absolutely.
Okay. And in fact, Dr. Husel was always available to everyone on the ICU floor, correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, he was rarely in that room that you call the call room, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And when he wasn't aggressively treating patients, night in and night out, he would, on slow nights, teach the other members of the ICU team, correct?
Yes, sir.
All in an effort to give better quality of care to the patients that came through the ICU.
Is that a question?
Correct.
Okay. She was right because there you added the correct to it, so I'll permit the question to stand there with the correct to.
You can answer, sir.
Yes, at that time, I believed that everything he was doing was to better the care of the patients in that hospital.
Okay, and in fact, all doctors are different, right?
Yes, sir.
For example, Dr. Hagris, who you worked with as well, right?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Hagris would spend a lot of time in the call room, correct?
I believe so, sir.
Much more time than Dr. Husel, right?
Definitely.
And you were aware that, and this was from working with other nurses, that these doses, these aggressive doses, had been done there for years, correct?
Object.
Sustained, let's place a foundation.
Sure. Mr. Black, you're aware, you worked with nurses that had been there for years, right? Everybody wasn't new.
Object, Your Honor. Context,
Permitted
please.
so far.
I'm sorry.
I said
Right.
permitted
Is
so
it-
far.
Go ahead, you can answer, sir.
Yes, sir. There were nurses there that had worked on the unit for years.
In fact, I'll just name a couple. Beth M.Q. had been there for 30 years.
Yes, sir.
Ann Irwin had also been there for 30 years.
Yes, sir.
Sharon Suber had also been there for 30 years.
Yes, sir.
Brandy Wells had been there for 15 years.
Yes, sir.
Akila Bowens had been there for over 5 years.
Yes, sir.
And of course, Tyler Rudman also was there for over 5 years.
Yes, sir.
So you would often lean on these more experienced nurses as you were learning throughout the process, correct?
Absolutely.
And some of the things you would discuss, of course, would be medications.
Yes, sir.
Permitted so far.
And that included the dose amounts of Dr. Husel, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So it was no secret that Dr. Husel was aggressive in his pain meds.
No, it was no secret.
You never witnessed Dr. Husel attempting to hide that in any way, shape, or form, correct?
No, sir.
Now, you talked about anticipatory anesthesia. That, of course, was how you were trained by Mount Carmel, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And when I say anticipatory, I'm referring to anticipating the pain when giving palliative withdrawal pain meds, correct?
Yes, sir. In every palliative extubation that I witnessed, that was a practice.
Okay. And the reason is that the goal at this point is to provide comfort to the patient, correct?
Yes, sir.
And these could very well be the last moments of a patient's life, and you're aware of that, correct?
Yes, almost certainly the last few moments.
And the thing that you want to do is get ahead of the pain, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it's not to hurt the patient, right?
Of course not.
Okay, so, of course, another aspect or benefit of getting ahead of the pain is that the family members, in witnessing their loved one's last moments, would not be ones where they're witnessing suffering, correct? Let me rephrase the question, Mr. Black. Another aspect of this comfort care is so those last moments are not ones of suffering.
Object, Your Honor.
Okay.
There's no standard of care discussed here.
Sustained.
Witnessing your patient suffering, well, let me backpedal a little bit for a second here and ask you this. You mentioned your pain scores and some of the factors that went into that. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Black, in light of that, when someone's on a ventilator and then they are suddenly taken off, there's a significant drop in the oxygen levels that person is breathing on, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
I don't, we've had,
We've had
There's-
this discussion, sustained.
okay. Based on your training and experience, sir, you know that there is a significant drop-off when someone's taken off a ventilator as it relates to oxygen, correct?
Object, Your Honor. This is anecdotal, and
Yeah,
it's
I
patient to
understand.
patient.
I'm going to permit the question.
You can answer.
So the ventilator was capable of delivering any amount of oxygen.
Stop.
So I don't know that that's the case.
Stop. The question is, in your experience, is that the case? the answer no? Or is the answer yes?
In cases, yes. In cases, no.
And that would be in cases where, of course, the oxygen level were set at approximately 100 or above 21%, correct?
That's correct, sir.
So that's what you mean, that 21% level is what we're breathing in, for example, this room, correct?
Exactly.
And if a patient's oxygen is above that, there's going to be a significant, well, if the patient's oxygen is at 80 or 100%, there's going to be a significant drop-off, correct?
That's correct.
And that's going to take some significant adjusting to, correct?
Object.
Yes, it's going to be very difficult.
It's sustained, you don't have to answer the question.
Now, sir, in addition to that, there are vasopressors that are keeping many of these patients alive, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, well, actually, I'll get into that a little bit further, but once how fast do vasopressors, once you turn them off,
Object,
actually?
Your Honor, out of the scope.
Well, it's an open cross, but sustained.
All right, let's get down to Ms. Walls. I'd like to discuss that for a moment. I thought you were talking about, sorry. Now, you mentioned that Ms. Walls was Jordan Blair's patient, correct?
That's correct.
And it was your understanding that this patient was actively dying on life support, correct?
That was my understanding at that time, sir.
Okay. And the family, as far as you're aware, wanted to withdraw support, correct?
That's what I was told.
And this, in your mind, once a family makes that decision, especially someone who is actively dying, like Ms. Walls, that is something that you try to do rather quickly, correct?
Absolutely. So anytime the goal of care were to change, it would be something that you would want to carry with great respect and urgency.
And in reference to that, for that reason, time is of the essence. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
Now, sorry, I just want to find something that you were asked about during direct, if I can have just a second. So on Ms. Wall's case, I won't get too much into her condition because she wasn't your patient. But you mentioned that the order came in by Dr. Husel, correct?
He verbally told me the order.
And that at some point you heard that the order had been rejected by the pharmacy, correct?
So there was, when I was in the room preparing to give the medication, I saw that on screen.
And you went ahead and gave the medication anyway because in your, according to your direct testimony, in your opinion, you thought that the pharmacy would just come and talk to Dr. Husel and he would explain more about the patient's condition, correct?
That was my assumption, yes.
And you had seen this before, where the pharmacy had come and requested more clarification after rejecting an order, correct?
I had seen that once before on a rejection like that, but there were times where there were many times where I'd seen the pharmacy clarify an order, and Dr. Husel would give his rationale and then they would proceed with the order.
So based on what you knew from your training and experience, and your also your understanding of the process, you felt comfortable administering the meds at that time, correct?
At that time, I had a great confidence in Dr. Husel's decision-making, and I was okay to do that.
Okay. And you mentioned that he was not available, and that's because he got called away for an emergency intubation at that time, correct?
That's correct.
So he was off saving a life while allegedly,
That's not on record.
well, it was an emergency situation, correct?
Yes, sir.
And an intubation is a life-saving measure, correct?
Yes, sir.
So he was not available because he's off saving someone's life, correct?
That's what I understood, sir.
Now, let's discuss Ms. Penix for a moment. Ms. Penix had, Ms. Penix was a very, very sick woman. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, sir, she was very sick.
And things can change rather rapidly at the ICU, correct?
Very rapidly.
In fact, you're aware that the ICU is the sickest of the sickest patients that go there, correct?
Yes, sir.
In fact, IC stands for intensive care, does it not?
It does, sir.
Now, in light of that, sir, you had, Ms. Penix had stabilized for a certain point, and you thought it was safe for the family to go home, that Ms. Penix would make it through the night, correct?
At that time, she seemed very stable, and that was my observation. Yes, sir.
However, unfortunately, at some point, she took a turn for the worse.
Yeah, very quickly.
And so much so that you thought that death was imminent.
Object.
Sustain.
You thought that it was important enough to call the family back, correct?
Yes, sir.
And when I say important enough, I mean her condition was bad, correct?
She was very unstable.
And she was declining, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it's at this point when the family arrived, correct?
Yes, sir.
And before you ever called Dr. Husel, a family member had come to you and asked you to make sure she was comfortable, correct?
That's correct, sir.
So the family was concerned about comfort care, as far as you're aware.
Yes, sir. They seemed concerned about that.
And they seemed very concerned about her pain, correct?
They were concerned about her pain, and also the feeling of struggling to breathe was very concerning to them.
In fact, they told you that was her biggest fear in life, correct?
Object.
You say sustain.
I'm offering it not for the truth of the matter asserted, but for effect on this listener and what he did next.
No. You're asking for a statement. It's hearsay. Sustain.
Now, sir, when you speak to the family, one of the things that you look for, or one of the things that you take into consideration for your care are, of course, the family's wishes.
Sir, I believe most of the time we were trying to understand the patient's wishes through the family.
That's what I was going to get to next, but I'll start there. One of the things that you want to learn, of course, are what the patients would have wanted, correct?
Yes, sir.
And And by way, and at this time, Ms. Penix was not verbal, she couldn't speak, correct?
That's correct.
And the only way that you would know that would be through the patient's family, correct?
That would be the best way to find out in that case.
Because of course they knew her best.
Correct.
Okay. Now, before you told the family to go home, I think you mentioned that it was just her husband and granddaughter, is that correct?
That's my recollection, sir.
But this time, when they were asked to come back, a lot more family members came?
Yes, sir. I think maybe 4 to 6 more.
Okay. And and you understood that to be because they knew they were coming to say their goodbyes, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, you found out during the course of all of this that Ms. Penix's greatest fear was suffocation, correct?
Object, Your Honor.
Now, you were asked about paralytics, were you not?
Yes, sir.
And it's your understanding that the paralytics wear off after approximately...
Object, Your Honor, outside of the scope of practice.
It's not...
Okay, I haven't heard the whole question yet. Finish your question.
Sure. Mr. Black, through your training and experience, you understand that paralytics wear off approximately 30 minutes after being administered.
Your Honor, continuing objection.
On the objection, do you know the answer in your practice?
I think it would depend on the certain medication, but so I don't know.
Okay. You're aware, sir, that that she was extubated after 48 minutes of having received this medication, though, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's past 30 minutes, correct?
Object, Your Honor.
48 minutes is...
He's already stated he doesn't know.
All I'm asking is that 48 minutes is after 38, after 30, excuse me.
I understand, but
sorry.
you're asking sustain.
Okay.
The jury knows the difference.
Okay. Now, you talked about, let me backtrack a little and set up the scene for a second. When the family members arrived, you mentioned that they had come to you and asked you to make her comfortable, correct?
They were concerned about her comfort, yes, sir.
Okay. And that is, subsequent to that is when you called for Dr. Husel to come to bedside, correct?
Yes, that was prior to calling Dr. Husel to the bedside.
Okay. And when he got there, that is when you observed him have his talk with the family, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, it's your understanding that Dr. Husel is incredibly meticulous, correct?
Yes, sir.
In fact, you had told the police that he was meticulous and he was very cautious with his talks, correct?
Yes, sir. He didn't enter this conversation quickly or lightly. It was only in critical conditions like this where the patient had reached a very unstable condition.
And in fact, you had advised the police that most doctors bring it up sooner, and it wasn't until death was pretty evident.
Okay, time out. I have a question out there. The objection?
I don't think it's relevant what he told the police about most doctors.
They've been discussing other doctors' practices this whole trial.
Okay.
Well-
Sustain then.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. And, well, I'd like to ask him about his training and experience as it relates to this. May I?
I haven't heard the question
Mr. Black, based on your training and experience, would you agree that most doctors that you've observed bring this talk up sooner than that of Dr. Husel?
Object.
Permitted.
Yes, sir.
And it's your understanding that Dr. Husel only has this discussion when death is pretty evident, correct?
At that time, that was my understanding, sir.
Okay. Now, when he was giving this talk, what was Dr. Husel's demeanor?
Are you asking?
Respectful.
Are you asking the one witness? Means the one victim.
I'm asking about Ms. Penix, the only one that he was. I'm sorry, can you answer that again?
I believe he was, respectful would be the first word that comes to mind, and patient with understanding or with explaining Ms. Penix's condition to the family.
Okay. And when he brought up you as an example in your size, that was in relation to the potential of Ms. Penix crashing, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if Ms. Penix would crash, your patient, you would be the one assisting in the CPR, correct?
That's correct, sir.
So this was an actual scenario. You weren't used as kind of like a figure in this talk, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. No, you had never seen Dr. Husel talk to other patients and point at you in the hallway and say, you see, Haas over there is going to be doing this CPR or something like that, correct?
Nothing like that, sir.
Okay. So in light of that, there was nothing that Dr. Husel was telling this family in relation to you that, of course, would not have been accurate, correct?
That's very correct.
Sir, when you gave the pain meds to Miss Walls, it was your intention to be giving comfort care for Miss Walls, was it not?
Yes, sir.
And it was your intention to free her from pain, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it was your intention, knowing that all life-saving measures were stopped, that you wanted her last moments to be of peace and dignity, correct?
Yes, sir.
And as it relates to Ms. Penix, your intention when you administered that dose was to give her comfort, correct?
Asked and answered, Your Honor.
Ms. Walls.
It's a different witness, but overruled.
Your intention was to provide comfort care, correct?
Yes, sir.
And your intention was to alleviate the family's concern of her suffocation?
Object.
Sustained.
You testified a moment ago that one of the concerns that the family had was her not being able to breathe, correct? Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And one of the issues, one of the concerns when you gave when you administered the drugs to Ms. Penix was to alleviate that from happening, correct?
Yes, sir. So there's a psychosocial aspect to this as well, and that she, her family had, so that she had a great fear of the feeling of suffocation or not being able to breathe. And so there was an anxiety portion of this as well that seemed to be very specific to this patient.
Okay. And that is Ms. Penix, correct?
Ms. Penix. Yes.
Sir, it was never your intention to harm Ms. Penix, was it?
Oh, of course not.
And it was never your intention to hasten her death, correct?
Absolutely not.
And I forgot to ask you about the palliative care training that you received and the end-of-life training. Part of that course also included ethics, correct?
I believe so.
And part of the ethics course taught you about the principle of double effect, did it not?
I believe that was in the course, yes, sir.
If I can have just a moment, Judge, I may be done.
You may.
Now, one last thing on the paralytics. You had also, as it relates to Ms. Penix, you had noticed that through the charting and through her vitals, that of course the paralytics had worn off, correct?
Object, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Calls for medical.
After giving Ms. Penix's care, at that time, after she passed away, her family thanked you and hugged you, correct?
Yes, sir.
I have no further questions.
Ms. Grubb?
Hi, Wes. Thanks for hanging with us.
Hi.
So let's turn back to the palliative care training that you did receive. There was some discussion about aggressively treating people in pain or dying people with pain medication, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did the trainers go into specific scenarios and specific drugs and talk about what would be appropriate for a specific case?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I believe you testified previously that there was no dosage training on narcotics during nursing school. Is that correct?
Objection, this has been
No, it would have been,
and leading.
Okay, it's transitional. I'll permit it.
it was just sort of the general indication or the classification of the drug more than any sort of dosing
Okay,
specific.
all right. And had you taken the time to go and read all about fentanyl and Versed and the synergistic effect on a person?
Objection, this has been asked and answered during direct.
No, I asked, it's redirect, and I did not ask whether he had read about it.
Okay.
I did ask about this.
It's within the scope. I'll permit it.
I don't believe so, ma'am.
Okay. Do you understand any of did you understand at the time that these doses were given, all of the contraindications or complications?
Leading.
Your Honor, I'm
Finish the
asking,
question.
did you understand the complications or contraindications of fentanyl and/or Versed?
Objection.
Sustained. It is leading.
No further questions.
Okay. Thank you kindly.
Thank you, Judge.
Thanks, Wes. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Janet.
You need to take it out. I got it cleared. Call your next witness.
Your Honor, may we do a quick sidebar before we put something on the
Yes.
record?
Thumbs up and down.
Okay. You ready there? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to send you to lunch early. We got to do something. Let's come back at 12:45. It's an hour and 15 minutes for people to transact their business and such. Get your lunch in, and we'll get started at 12:45. So with that, remember the admonition, you're to lunch.
All right.
Anything for the record, Ms. Grubb?
Nothing this time, Your Honor.
Mr. Bias?
Nothing from us.
Okay. 12:45, everybody.